Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to do that very last part of 3.3. All right, remember the quiz that you're going to take either on Wednesday or Thursday. That is going to be on 3.1 through 3.3. So this is going to be the very last thing that ends up on your quiz that you're going to take later in the week. All right, and we are just now finally getting into actual graphing. All right, this whole chapter is on graphing, and now we finally get to graph some linear functions. All right, so we wanted to give ourselves a little note here. We could say we are graphing linear functions. So we're going to learn a ton of different ways to do this. All right, but the first way and the way that really works with anything is to graph with the table. We're going to learn certain tips and tricks we can use with standard form or with slope-intercept form. But for now, the table is going to be how we graph. So you're going to have some graphing questions on your quiz. You're going to graph with the table. All right, so it says in exercises 12 and 13, graph the linear function. So just a quick note, when I ask you to graph something, you're going to have some graphing questions in your homework. If at all possible, see if you have any graph paper. In general, that's going to how I'm going to ask you to do any graphing questions. If you don't have any, you're at home, that's fine. You can do it on notebook paper just for today, but just try and make it as legible as possible. All right? I always need to see your X and your y-axis. Make sure you're labeling everything on your graph. All right, I need to see, okay, 2, 4, okay, or just 1, 2. I need to see what each little tick mark is equal to. All right, so just be careful with that on your graphs. Again, if you don't have any graph paper on you today, it's not the end of the world, but from now on, I am going to ask. I have plenty of it in my room. Just grab a couple sheets from me just so that it's easier for you to graph and it's easier for me to see. All right, so I've got number 12 here. This S of X is equal to 1/2 X minus 2. All right, so remember, it's just like f of x, just like we talked about on Friday. If you haven't seen Friday's video, make sure you go back and watch that because this format doesn't make any sense if you haven't watched Friday's video. All right, so remember, we can use any letter here for our function. So this is our function S is how we would say this. And we have this little table here. And this table actually goes a little bit farther than I need you to. I only need 3 points in order to really graph. So I'm going to take off this -4 and +4. Okay, make our lives a little bit easier. If you have 3 lines, you can graph, and that's how I'm going to ask you to graph on your quiz. So it's giving us some x values, which is nice. Sometimes you'll just have to come up with your own x values. So let's go over here and start working some of this out. Okay. I've got, that's the second one. I've got S of x is equal to 1/2 x minus 2. And I want to plug in -2. I want to plug in 0. I want to plug in +2. Okay, so a way I could say that is I could say I want to find S of -2. I want to find S of 0, and I want to find S of +2. Remember what we did on Friday where we're plugging different things in for x? That's exactly what we're doing. We're plugging in different x values to see what we end up getting for the y, and then we're going to have the x and the y value. We're going to plug that into our graph. All right, so we have S of -2, so 1/2 times -2 minus 2. That's going to get us 1/2 times -2 is going to get me -1 minus 2. So S of -2 is -3. I don't know why I put that parentheses there. -3. All right, so I've got my first one. Let's go with 0. All right, it seems like a lot of work to plug in and plug in and plug in, but Usually the math on these isn't too difficult. All right, so 1/2 times x, my x right now is 0 minus 2. I know that 1/2 times 0 is 0, and I know that 0 minus 2 is -2. All right, so I have my second value. Over here, just s of 2, same thing, 1/2 times x, which is now 1/2 times 2, minus 2. Okay, 1/2 times 2, I get 1, minus 2, which I know is -1. Okay, so I know when I plug in -2, I get -3. When I plug in 0, I get -2. And when I plug in 2, I get -1. So let's go ahead, let's plug that into our little table over here. It was -3, -2, and -1, yes. So what this means in the table, you have x and s of x. If you want to make that y, if that makes that less confusing, you can always change that f of x or g of x or whatever to y. Okay, so it gives you an x value paired with that y value. You could also write this as -2, -3. That's your x and y value. Okay, 0, 2, and 2, -1. Now, for most of us, that makes it a little clearer how this is going to look on our graph. Most of us are used to plugging in those points on the graph. Okay, if you need a little bit of a reminder, all right, remember, this is always x, y. If I can get back to my pen. There we go. This is always x, y. All right, so right here I have my x value, -2. Okay, so on my x-axis, I find this -2. Then I go to the y value, so -3, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so right here would be -3. This is my point where the x value and that y value intersect. All right. Then I've got 0, 2, so 0 here on this x-axis. Oh, I miswrote that. That's -2. Sorry about that. Okay, -2, so I'm going down 1, 2. Okay, my y value right there is -2. That's this point. And then 2, -1, so 2 over here on my x value, -1 for my y. When I have 3 points like this, now I can draw my line. I would make sure you had some type of straight edge. If you have a ruler, that's perfect. If you want to use the edge of a notebook, something like that, just something to make sure that you have a straight line. I'm going to try and do this here on my computer. We'll see if it turns out to be a straight line. There we go. That's close enough for me working on my computer screen. All right. Again, just do your absolute best to try and make these graphs neat. All right, so I can see where your points are. If you absolutely have to do something on notebook paper, do your absolute best to make sure it's legible. I can see what your x and y are. I can see what the values are. All right, but there you have it. There is your line for this function. All right, let's try and do the same thing over here, but now we've got this t of x. All right, so t of x is equal to 1 minus 2x. Same thing. You really only need the 3 points. So I'm going to go with -1, 0, and 1. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing. I just have to plug those values in to this t of x function. Okay. I'm doing this work on another page just because it'll get a little bit crowded on that same page. If you have room to do it on that page, that's fine. I just didn't want it to be hard to follow. There we go. There's my t of x. So this time the values that it wanted me to plug in were -1, so I want t of -1, I want t of 0, and t of +1. Okay, remember, when you put a number in that function notation, it means you're plugging it in for x. If you haven't watched that function notation video, you've got to watch it or this doesn't make any sense. All right, so you're saying now inside of x, you've got 1 minus 2 times -1. All right, negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Always be careful with those signs when you're multiplying. And then we know t of negative 1 is 3. All right, so next one, t of 0, I have 1 minus 2 times 0. Oh, I wrote f out of habit. T of 0 is 1 minus 2 times 0 is 0, so t of 0 is just 1. And then t of 1, same thing, 1 minus 2 times 1. I get t times t of 1. I misspoke there. T of 1. I'm plugging in 1 to t. So 1 minus 2, and then that final answer there is going to be negative 1. All right, so 3, 1, and negative 1. I'm going to plug that into my function. 3, 1, negative 1. I'm going to double check, make sure I have the right numbers. Yes, 3, 1, negative 1. Same thing. You don't absolutely have to write these values here as the ordered pairs, as these coordinates like I did over here, but a lot of people find that that makes it easier. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write them. I've got 1, 3. Okay, always remember this t of x. If it confuses you, just write y. Okay, because that's what it means. It's the output. All right, 0, 1, and 1, negative 1. Okay, those are my 3 ordered pairs that I'm going to use. So negative 1, 3. Again, negative 1 here on the x, and then up to 1, 2, 3. Okay, that would be 3 there for my y. Then the next one I have 0, 1, so 0 here on my x, and then just 1 for that y, and 1 for x, negative 1 for y. Okay, all those little dots are just me counting out. The big dots are the actual points on the graphs. Don't let those trip you up. All right, same thing. Try and find a ruler, edge of a notebook, something like that, so you get a nice straight line. All right, I did the best I could on the computer screen. Okay, make sure you're going through all your points there. And that is the graph there of t of x. All right, so make sure, especially if you feel shaky on graphing, a lot of people have told me that they really don't like graphing or it's a little bit confusing for them. That's fine. Just make sure you're getting lots of practice. Make sure you get through this assignment 3.3 day 2 and go ahead and get started on that practice quiz. All right, if you are an A-day person, I'm giving it to you in class today. B-day, I'm going to give it to you tomorrow, but I have it posted to Schoology if you want to get an early start on it. All right, go ahead and get started on those assignments, and I will see you guys tomorrow.